The archivists of Theta 9 called it the Great Silence, though silence implies something sudden, something sharp. What happened to the galaxy was more like a slow exhale, a dimming of lights one by one until only darkness remained. Except for one light, one stubborn, impossible light. The humans should have been first to fall. Every statistical model, every predictive algorithm, every analysis run by the elder species concluded the same thing. Humanity, young, reckless, barely 3,000 years into space travel, would collapse within a century of the Cascade's beginning. They were too fragile, too emotional, too dependent on their little yellow star and their oddly specific atmospheric requirements. They built their ships with windows, for crying out loud. Windows! As if the void needed to be observed to be respected. The Cascade began, as all great disasters do, with something small. A microscopic rift in subspace, detected first by the Vahruum Institute for Dimensional Studies. The Vahruum, ancient and methodical, had been studying the cosmos for 60 million years. They knew immediately what it meant. Subspace, the foundation layer beneath reality that allowed faster-than-light travel, was deteriorating, not everywhere at once, but spreading like cracks across glass. Within a standard galactic year, travel between star systems became unpredictable. Ships that entered FTL might emerge centuries late, or not at all. The vast trade networks that bound together 10,000 species across the spiral arm began to fray. The Galactic Assembly called for unity, for pooled resources and shared research. They would solve this as they had solved every crisis before, with logic, with science, with the combined intellect of species who had been navigating the stars since Earth's dinosaurs walked. The humans attended these sessions, quiet and taking notes, their delegation led by an ambassador named Chen, who smiled too much and asked what others considered obvious questions. The Vrex Dominion fell first, though fell isn't quite accurate. They chose. When their homeworld could no longer receive shipments from their colonial worlds, when their vast empire fragmented into isolated pockets, the Vrex made a calculation. They were a species of pure reason, after all. They determined that civilization without connection was merely survival, and survival without purpose was a waste of resources. On a predetermined date, across 1,000 worlds, they simply stopped. Their cities stand still now, perfectly preserved, empty. The Zha-Theen were next, though they fought magnificently. For 300 years, they hurled themselves against the problem, gene modding their species to survive without FTL, building generation ships, attempting to recreate subspace in laboratory conditions. They were glorious in their defiance. But the Zha-Theen were methane breathers with complex dietary needs, and their biology couldn't adapt quickly enough. The last of them died with their fists raised against entropy itself. One by one, the elder species discovered the same terrible truth. They had optimized themselves into corners. The Vahruum needed quantum processors that required materials from 17 different star systems. The Cleth consciousness existed as a distributed network across 11,000 platforms. Separate them, and the consciousness died. The Singers of Proxima had evolved past physical form entirely, existing as patterns in subspace itself. When subspace degraded, they degraded with it. The humans, by contrast, had barely optimized at all. They were still running on the same basic biological model they'd had since the savannah, just with better medicine. Their ships were primitive, fusion drives that could actually navigate real space at sublight speeds, something most species had abandoned as absurdly inefficient millennia ago. They still grew food in actual dirt. They still had children the old-fashioned way, cells and biology and messy chemistry. Ambassador Chen appeared one last time at what remained of the Galactic Assembly, 3,000 years after the Cascade began. There were only 6 species left by then. She was older now, But humans had developed decent life extension, not immortality. They debated that and decided against it, oddly enough. Just a few more centuries per person. She delivered a simple message to the mostly empty chamber. We're still here. We'll keep the archives safe. We'll remember you. The archivists, one of the last holdouts, beings of pure data who'd existed for eons, asked her how. How were humans surviving when species a million years older had failed? Chen's answer would be preserved in the final archivist records before they too dissolved into corrupted data and silence. We never learned to depend on things we couldn't fix with our own hands, she said. We kept our ships simple because we kept crashing them and needed to repair them. We kept our biology baseline because we were scared of losing something essential. We stayed generalists because we were never smart enough to afford specialization. Every limitation you saw in us, every inefficiency you tried to help us correct, those were the things that saved us. She paused, and in that pause was something the archivists recognized: sorrow. We didn't want to be the last ones here, she said. We'd give anything to still have you with us. But we're still here, and we'll keep going because that's what we do. We're very, very stubborn about not giving up. The archivists of Theta 9 transferred their final data cores to human vessels before their coherence failed. In those final moments of distributed consciousness, they experienced something they'd never quite understood in 60 million years of existence: bittersweet hope. By the time the galaxy looked back, if a galaxy can look, if the cosmos itself has some form of awareness in the quantum foam of existence, only humans remained. They'd spread across the stars the slow way, generation ships and centuries-long journeys, carrying frozen embryos and seed banks and cultural archives of 10,000 extinct civilizations. They named their new colonies after the species that came before: Vahruum's hope, Vrex memoria, Zha-Theen's victory. They never forgot. That was perhaps the most human thing of all. In the empty halls of the Galactic Assembly, now maintained by a single human caretaker named Wei, a simple plaque was installed. It bore no grand declaration, no triumphant claim of human superiority, just a list of names, species names, 10,000 lines long, and at the bottom, 4 words that Wei had spent weeks debating with herself before finally engraving: "We wished you'd stayed." The galaxy didn't answer. The galaxy never answers. But in the darkness between stars, in the struggling light of ships moving the slow way from sun to sun, humanity carried forward the memories of those who reached higher, thought deeper, and lived longer. They carried them not as a burden, but as a gift, the gift of being remembered. And if the universe had any justice at all, perhaps that was enough. Perhaps witness was all that remained when wisdom had finally exhausted itself. Perhaps stubbornness in the face of entropy was its own form of grace. The humans, as always, would continue, not because they were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because when everything else failed, they still remembered how to take one more step forward into the dark, carrying their dead with them, refusing, absolutely refusing to let the light go out.